procedure is that each candidate will give a 5-minute presentation. I've asked them to talk about their vision for the city of Prescott. I hope they'll stay on track. Jolene, do you have a watch to keep kind of track of? And then you can kind of wave to me when they've gone over 6 minutes. We'll give them 5, and probably go a little longer. So we're going to start with Connie. Connie is the woman of the group, but she's also was a candidate in the year 2017. In the year 2017, Connie was a candidate and ran for the city council in 2017.
Came very close with no cigar.
I got you.
500 votes or so.
All right, we're gonna go in order down this way, and Jim Lamerson, Lamerson Jewels will finish it. He has been on the city council for 16 years and was just recently off the council for a year or two, right? About a year?
It's okay to say unelected.
He was unelected. Okay. Connie.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you for coming today. It's a nice turnout, especially in the middle of the day. That's the presumption is you're all retired. Someplace I'd like to be soon. You want me to tell a little bit about myself? Okay. So I'm a businesswoman, and I think if you heard the morning report, I kind of reiterated that a little bit. I have today in my life started and operated 4 businesses, mostly down in the valley, 2 up here in Prescott. I started my lifelong career is a general contractor. I was a member of the Arizona ROC for almost 40 years, 37 years. I still hold one of the oldest licenses in the country, in the state. And at the time, I was only one of 11 back in early 1980s, 11 females in the whole state that held a general contractor's license. I built custom homes. I did a lot of designing. I worked for architects. I had a design firm, and then ultimately merged my construction business with my interior design firm. And I had Keswick Construction, which was a design build firm. And I did a lot of working with clients. Some of our projects would take up to 2 years. My book of work was primarily attorneys, judges, doctors, and CPAs. And that was a very difficult thing. So over the years, I did a lot of continuing education, i.e. contracts, a lot of legal, studying the codes and the best practices in the building industry. Through the years, I became an expert witness and did many arbitrations with several judges down in the valley, working for the Arizona ROC. My company was very successful, and I kept me busy. I worked, as anybody knows that owns a company, Eric, same thing. You work all day long, you live in your car. I literally had one of the first mobile fax machines back in the day, if you remember that. I had one of the first mobile phones back in the day, lived out of my car, and bless his heart, my poor son had to come along with me. I do have one son who's a firefighter down in Phoenix. And anyway, through the years, the things that you learn that I think I could contribute here, and have actually contributed, not on the council, but outside the council for the city, are all of the attributes you learn while running a business. And I think this group in particular will be happy to know that I'm a major cost analysis person. I'm very fiscally conservative. I understand about economic development and the things that this city needs. I participated down in Phoenix in the Encanto area. I don't know how many of you are from Phoenix transplants, but back in the 80s, we have a little historic area down in Phoenix. It's called the Encanto area. And right next to that is another area that is now heavily under renovation called the Coronado District. Before I left Phoenix, which has been now about 15 years ago, I was very heavily involved in renovating those. My company was one of the very first companies to go into that area. At the time, it was infested with a lot of drug addiction, a lot of prostitution. Those beautiful bungalows were just falling apart and nobody cared. We went in, we now call it Lawyer's Ghetto. It's very close to the downtown law firms, and we started buying those beautiful little bungalows and fixing them up on our own nickel. But at the time, I got very involved with the Phoenix Development Department. That's also what led me here in Prescott as I moved back here and saw a lot of the blight in our downtown area. I haven't been here. My parents moved here in the early 70s. And I actually lived in the Marks House. If anybody knows where the Marks House is downtown on Union, I lived there in the early 80s for a while. And when I came back, I really, because I was a working person, I didn't have a lot of time all the years I would come up here and see my family. who's been very entrenched up here. My brothers own businesses and my parents. My father was very involved in the city before he passed away. When I came back, I was a little bit distraught to see how many of the, again, this history of ours in Arizona had, kind of fallen to deferred maintenance. So I started getting involved. I personally started buying up some of them, the houses that were formerly used as drug rehab houses, the sober living homes, we call it. And, which allowed me to get a little bit more involved in the city because I recognize we have a serious problem downtown. I've told everybody that I live in ground zero, and that's really what it was. When you live downtown in the historic area, if there's any lapse of judgment, I'll say, on the city's part or some of the businesses that are taking advantage of this beautiful city, we see it first. I don't think you're going to see it as much if you live in a gated community on the outside of the downtown area. But this is our jewel. The county plaza is really what our whole city runs around, and I'm very interested in keeping this city. I have 17 nieces and nephews that were born and raised here. They pretty much have all gone. They've left because we haven't had jobs for them, especially the six-figure jobs. So that's another area I'm really involved in here is providing my expertise for economic development. When our former mayor, Harry Oberg, was mayor, he had a economic advisory committee. I was on that. I served on that. I served on the Sober Living Homes Ad Hoc Committee. I'm a member of the Friends of the Prescott Airport. I totally support that. I supported the Hilton Hotel going in. Anything that renovates and takes care of this jewel that we have going forward, we need to really, put every penny we can into doing that because it comes back to us threefold. We have a new organization that just started up, the Center for the Future. I'm supporting that. That will be an avenue for our kids. When you talk about an industry that has 550,000 openings, which is cybersecurity, and we are poised right here. Oh, is it time? I'm sorry. I could talk about this all day long. But anyway, these are just some of the things I've been involved in the renovation of the downtown. Again, through my background in business, I think I could be very helpful on the council, and I hope you vote for me, or wish me good luck anyway. Thank you very much.
This is Tenney. He is an assistant principal, former educator, teacher, and he is at Abajet.
Pronounced Prescott High School.
Oh, you're at high school? Oh, I thought you were at
I was the principal of Abajet for several years.
Okay, we'll let him talk. You might want to take your mask off.
Let me see if I can do this. There was a sign on the door asking me to keep my mask on. I'm a little follower, so
Yes, to come in.
I'll go with that for sure. Well, thank you for having me here today. If you can't hear what I'm saying, please do indicate, and I would be happy to make an adjustment if I need to. My name is Clark Tenney. My family moved to Prescott in 1983 when I was a young man, so I am one of the perhaps few people you'll meet who is raised in Prescott, Arizona, and has raised my own family in Prescott, Arizona. There's probably a few of you in the audience, a couple of you I recognize who are in that situation. As was mentioned, I'm a lifelong educator. When I was in college, thinking of what I wanted to do, I knew I wanted to be rich, so I said, hey, I'm going to be a teacher. And it's worked out okay for me. My wife and I have been married for 29 and a half years next week. We'll be celebrating our 30th anniversary this summer. We've got 5 children who we've raised in Prescott. 4 of them are graduates of Prescott High School, and 1 of them is a senior at Prescott High School on track to graduate with honors this year. We're very proud of them. I've seen the growth of Prescott over the last 30 years or so that I've been a resident on and off. Obviously, while I was away at university, wasn't a resident of Prescott, and then I spent the first few years of my career up in Utah. Other than that, we've been here the entire time. The time that I was growing up, I spent 12 years actually teaching overseas in Japan at an international school, but we had a summer home here in Prescott and spent about 4 months a year here. And I've been full-time residents back now for, it's probably been 15 years or so since I've been back. As was mentioned earlier, after 22 years of teaching, I got my master's degree in educational leadership and applied for the principal position at Abayajud Elementary School, was selected for that, and I was the principal at Abayajud for 4 years. After being at Abayajud for 4 years, we did some restructuring in our district, and our superintendent and the new principal at Prescott High School, Mark Galagaski, asked me if I would come over and help out there. and I've been the assistant principal for academics at Prescott High School for the last 4 years there. So that's a bit about my career. My postgraduate work is in the superintendency, and I've got my Arizona superintendent certificate as well. As I've mentioned, I've been in Prescott for many, many years. I've seen it grow from a town of, it was probably just under 20,000 when we moved here in 1983. And as you know, we're about double that now. So I've seen a lot of the real positives and some of the negatives that have come along with growth, and I've got some ideas about what Prescott might look like in its future. I have to say, I probably should have started with this. I'm honored to be among these 5 finalists. There are a lot of interested, community-minded people who submitted applications to fill out the rest of Billy Orr's term on the City Council, and I've thought for years, I need to give back to my community in an additional way, besides just being in education. The thought of being on the City Council is intriguing to me. I think of myself as a listener, someone who researches things deeply, and then makes decisions after that. I don't come into things with preconceived notions. I think that blanket statements about the way that a person will vote is an intellectually lazy way to govern. And so I would take the approach that I would listen to what people in Prescott have to say, and do the research, talk with my fellow council members, and make decisions from there. It's worth noting that I'm a lifelong Republican. When I was 18, I registered as a Republican. I have been ever since. I think of myself as fairly conservative, but I'm also a proponent of education, as you can imagine. Unfortunately, somehow that's become politicized and particized in some respects, but I'm grateful to live in a city where we enjoy broad support for our community schools. And I see one of my former high school teachers in the back there who had an impact on my life, and I appreciate him very much. Mr. Kramer, it's good to see you. If I might, I'd like to read from my application, my vision for Prescott in the future. And how long do I have left? Oh, perfect. I've got plenty of time. I'll read nice and slow for you. How's that? This may be overly broad, but this is kind of what I think about my town. Let me tell you this as well. When we moved here in 1983, I moved from Northern California. We lived about 40 minutes from the beach in a place called Santa Rosa. Some of you may have been there, Sonoma County. Beautiful area. Absolutely loved it. I've been born there, lived there my entire life to that point. And when my parents said, we're moving to Arizona, I thought my world was ending. I just thought, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing that has ever happened. We had the opportunity to live in Las Vegas, Phoenix, anywhere in between. Unfortunately, my parents chose Prescott. I kind of came kicking and screaming, but within a few days, I was sold. I thought, this place is beautiful. There's pine trees, there's lakes, there's rocks. I met good friends at school and at church, and I found to be the case then what fortunately I found to be the case today. One of my parts of my job at Prescott High School is to show new folks around when they come to school, and many of them are new to the area. And I always ask them, where are you from? How are you finding things so far, etc. I've heard 3 times just in the last week, two folks from California, as you can maybe imagine, one person from Texas. They're shocked at how friendly people are. They said, this is a great place to be. I can't believe how kind people are and how welcoming they are and how friendly they are. I found the very same thing when we moved from California when I was a child. And I've been grateful to live in that type of community ever since, and I want to contribute to that community. What I wrote was, I will be forever grateful that when my family chose to move to Prescott in 1983, we found a beautiful, welcoming community that has become my hometown. Over these next 10 years, I envision a Prescott well known for welcoming a variety of viewpoints that skillfully manages intelligent, water-wise growth. I envision a family-friendly Prescott with a robust, technology-based job market. Connie mentioned that just a minute ago. I think that needs to be a huge priority for us going forward. And with world-class recreational amenities and open spaces like Granite Hills. That's a big priority for me as well. I spend a lot of time outside, hike on the trails, I run marathons. I know that the investment that the relatively minor investment that we put into open spaces and trails has paid off in eco-friendly tourism and people are choosing to relocate to our town as well, which has added to our tax base in a significant way. Great, thank you. I envision a Prescott with excellent medical care facilities, with an active airport, and with excellent community schools and colleges. I envision Prescott with well-maintained streets and parks, and with public-private partnerships that enhance the quality of life for all of our citizens. Thank you.
active members that are already members of Citizens Tax Committee to poll these wonderful candidates. I mean, you've got really good talent here. So I'm going to hand out a polling sheet, which I asked the active members to fill out and return to you. You also have the option of going online with Sarah Seidel, city.clerk@ prescott-az.com, okay? That way you can, .gov, okay, sorry about that, .gov. You can go online and make your comments if you're not a member. So that gives you an opportunity to hear these lovely speeches today, and then you can go online and support the one that you think will be the right vision for taking Billy Orr's place. I'll repeat the website. It is city.clerk@ prescott-az.gov. This is Eric Moore. If you don't know him, Jay's Bird Barn, he's been a wonderful supporter of our media. I hear him all the time on radio, and he's got a great little shop, so take it away.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation to participate in this forum. I really don't know much about your organization, but I guess this is a good beginning right here. I'd like to also give a little background. I thought it was funny what Connie was saying about if you own your own business, you live in your car. I ate my lunch as I drove over here in the car, because of course I've been working today. I grew up in Tucson, moved there when I was 6 years old, and then I moved to Prescott in 1991, so this year marks our 30th year in Prescott. I have been married for 37 years. My wife and I have 6 children. We had 4 sons biologically, and after we were done having children, we decided to do foster care, and we adopted 2 foster children from the Arizona State foster care system. I have a bachelor's degree in business management, and I've spent almost 40 years in a retail-related career. I was in the grocery industry for over 20 years, and for the last 18 years, I have owned and operated Jay's Bird Barn. I've also added Hallmark to our business and a new company called Arizona Field Optics, which I created just a few years ago. I think for somebody who's running for a public office, it's good for you to know a little about my background and my lifestyle. I'm happy to say that I have no personal debt, and our business is also debt-free. I believe in capitalism, and I believe in hard work. I'm a conservative Republican, and I am a fiscal conservative. I've never been audited, I've never declared bankruptcy, and I am current in my personal and corporate taxes. I think how you live your private life is a very important factor if you want to become a public official. Before opening Jay's Bird Barn, I worked as the community services manager for the town of Chino Valley. I had direct responsibility as the community services manager for parks, recreation, the senior center, the public library, for grant writing, and also for any special projects as assigned by the town manager. As a department manager for the town, I attended all city council meetings. I made presentations to the mayor and council, and so I had experience working with a council-mayor form of government. I opened Jay's Bird Barn in 2003, and our business has been tremendously successful. Shortly after the recession in 2008, we actually opened a second store, which for most people thought that was a crazy move in 2010. We opened our second store in 2010 in Sedona, Arizona, and we opened our third store in 2016 in Flagstaff. In 2018, I chose to close the Sedona store, even though it was a profitable store, so that we could focus our efforts on the 2 larger stores in larger markets. I think being in a county seat is really beneficial when you own a small business. Sedona was just really too small of a market, whereas Flagstaff and Prescott are both county seats. In 2016, we added Hallmark to our 2 store locations, and then I created the Arizona Field Optics Company, which specializes in optical equipment such as spotting scopes, binoculars, rifle scopes, tripods, and optical accessories. One of the relationships in the community that I am particularly proud of is our partnership with YEI, Yavapai Exceptional Industries. About 9 years ago, we partnered with them, and we continue to this day. We provide meaningful employment for adults with disabilities in our business. They mix all of the birdseed blends that we make and sell in our stores. Last week, I ordered over 12,000 pounds of birdseed from YEI. This week was over 13,000 pounds of birdseed. So we keep them busy with making birdseed. Recently, I've been making my way through a thorough reading of the 2015 general plan. And since you're a tax-based committee, I thought I would share this thought that kind of jumped out at me as I was reading it this week. There was a quote, it says, quote, "A secure local revenue base is necessary to establish and maintain essential city services." And I concur with that statement. Individuals and families have choices as to where they live, in an incorporated community or in an unincorporated area. There are many reasons why individuals choose to live in an incorporated community. The convenience of commercial goods and services. Where would we be if we didn't have Costco and Trader Joe's, right? The city provided and maintained services such as water, sewer, trash removal, snow removal, zoning and building codes. We all know the value that living in an incorporated area provides. I've done quite a bit of traveling with my bird watching in third world countries, and I have visited these areas, and it has created within me a great appreciation for the privilege of living in the United States of America. We are extremely blessed to live here. I'm getting the signal. I'll wrap up. I'm on my last page. On a financial note, I support the promise that the taxpayers made to fund our fire and police pensions. I'm not a defunder by any reason or any means. I believe the system needs to be reformed. The PRS is in the state constitution and needs to be reformed on the state level. It is a statewide issue, not a local issue. My vision for Prescott's future is a sustainable community, meeting the many expectations of its citizenry: affordable housing, access to excellent health care, employment opportunities, excellence in public education, and higher education opportunities, transportation, recreation, open space, the list could go on and on. There are many reasons why I'm running for city council. One is a sense of duty and a desire to give back to the community that I live in. I love living in Prescott, but as a citizen, I have concerns that are shared by many people in our community. These issues facing our community need thoughtful consideration. Protecting our water supply, protecting encroachment on the airport, infrastructure needs, adequate funding for our public school system, employment opportunities that will allow the rising generation to stay in the community where they grew up and raise their own families. I feel I would bring to the council an attitude of being a good listener, being inclusive, and not having contempt for individuals with differing points of view. Thank you very much.
I think the gentleman is going to close this out for this part of the session is well known to most of you. He has a jewelry shop down on Cortez Street. Jim Lamerson has also been very active in the city council, and let him tell you a little bit more about his vision for Prescott.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all, and thank you for the courtesy of coming to listen to us. Thank my fellow members up here speaking. I respect every one of you. I've been married for 48 years. My wife and I moved to Prescott over 40 years ago. We have one daughter. She was born here in Prescott. I had one mother and one father. They both died here in Prescott. I love Prescott. I came here for freedom. I worked in New York and I left New York there. I didn't bring New York with me. I don't want New York here. And, you know, I don't tell anybody, please don't come to Arizona. Just leave California in California. Don't bring it here. Especially Prescott. One of the things I remember back when I first got on council, we didn't even have a parking garage downtown, thanks to Mary Ann Suttles, pushing that every week. We got a parking garage. We didn't have a Costco. We didn't have a Walmart. We didn't have a lot of amenities when I came to Prescott. You had to go to Phoenix for almost everything. Not only was it inconvenient, it was not safe. Putting people in our age category, the bulk of Prescott, Arizona, is a little older than other communities, but on that freeway out there, just to go get groceries is not a good idea. So I'm kind of proud of Prescott. I'm proud of some of the things we've done. I'm kind of proud of some of the retail infrastructure we bought here, so that the consumers here, the residents here, the taxpayers here, don't have to go to Phoenix every time they need a roll of toilet paper or something. But anyway, I'm past chairman of the board, Prescott Chamber of Commerce, twice. I was a 2-term president of Rotary Club of Prescott. I was a 7-term mayor pro tem, served under 3 different mayors. I served with 7 different council makeups. And you know, I didn't do what Prescott is today by myself. I'm glad I was able to help. Prescott is what it is today because there was a lot of good people willing to put their character, their reputations, their businesses, everything about who they are on the line to help this community, and they all need to be applauded. My vision for the future of Prescott is not to change Prescott. I would like to keep Prescott who we are. We're a small, rural, middle northern Arizona community with a western flavor. I love our rodeo. I love the cowboy theme of the city of Prescott. I love what we were able to accomplish with the adult center. I love what we were able to accomplish with the new fire stations, with all the infrastructure that we put in. There was 72, if my numbers are right, 72 major road projects. My last term on the council, we had done 72 major road projects and then 35 major infrastructure improvement projects. So I'm very proud of what the councils that I've served on have been. I see an opportunity to keep Prescott, but we don't need to hide behind a wall. We need to know that we're going to have more people coming here. They're welcome here. Just leave where you're from there. Come here, embrace who we are, and be part of who we are. And I firmly believe that. I would like to bring up the fact that I've enjoyed being a servant to the citizens of Prescott. And I would enjoy continuing my service to the city of Prescott. Some people tell me, well, gee whiz, don't you think as many years as you've been involved is long enough? And I'm just glad that Dwight D. Eisenhower didn't feel that way, or General MacArthur didn't feel that way. My whole family are military people, and I chose to serve my city. This city's been good to me. I moved here for freedom. I own my own jewelry store. I never had that opportunity in New York. I'm glad I left New York, and I'm glad I'm in Prescott, Arizona. Thank you very much.
Talk about a tough choice. These are great people, and each one of them deserves your attention. Connie, do you want to say something?
Whomever doesn't win, will you please run for the council afterwards? Legitimately run?
Would you pass this out?
That's all.
Yes, I know that Jim is already passing his petitions in the event that things don't work out for him. Nonetheless, this is a great opportunity for an individual without spending $6,000 or $8,000 to get on the city council for 3 years. About 3 years, right? Yeah, you get a nice long term. So this is a real windfall for one of these folks. And so we're going to pass out to the members a poll. The poll is choose the one you like based upon what you know. you don't know enough, then you make a choice, but any comments you have, there's room for comments on this poll, and I hope you exercise it. Folks, most of you are in business and have other things to do. You do not have to stay. You are welcome to leave now and leave it up to us to run the rest of the meeting. So, go ahead.
Some questions then.
Oh, wait. Oh, we forgot questions and answers. Holy cow. Somebody must have a question. Arlen.
Thank you all for being here. Arlen Shinoy. The question is, I was waiting to hear what you all thought were the biggest challenges, if you wanted to, for those of us in Prescott. I can name them, I'd rather give you guys the opportunity to do that and address fiscally as well as just functionally living here. The fiscal challenges that I don't think to be, but people like it are, but at least the functional challenges we do have, and your comments.
Anybody want to take up this on? Connie.
I think, having been involved in Prescott and sat on multitude committees and participated in some of the economic development programs they've had here, for example, Ron Drake coming, I think one of the biggest issues we have is retaining our millennials and making sure the kids that come out of these 5 colleges stay here, pay our taxes, contribute to our community. Of course, the next concern is safe yield. We've got to be concerned about water consumption. Even though my background is in construction, I am anti-urban sprawl. If anybody knows me, and I know the city has heard me talk about infill, I speak a lot about infill lots. We have issues right now with what they call alternative water, which is of course the water that has been reconstituted, that go into some of the new communities out there. I think we've got to be very concerned about that. That is the one ace that we have that will ultimately control our growth, is whether or not we are going to be able to support this. And thankfully, we have organizations like CWAG, people at the city that are really keeping an eye on these kinds of things. So those are very important things. There's a lot of other things. Of course, I talked a little bit about the economic development. That's important for us. We can't be a dying city. We've got to be productive. We can't allow businesses in here that continue to take from us. We've got to allow businesses in here that give back. I'm a huge proponent of that going forward. We went through the sober living homes and the drug rehab businesses. I'm afraid we're going to get back into that once the jail is open. So we've got to be a watchdog, and hopefully we can all be a firewall to some of the negative things that have come into the city by way of having no business license requirement. I was opposed to that, getting rid of that business license. Not that I like sitting down paying that $35, it's a pain in the butt, believe me, I know, just because it takes time. But the information that we get from those business licenses, it's invaluable. We've got to keep an eye on this. It's called accountability. So we do need to reinstitute that business license. If I were to get back on the council, that'd be one of my goals, to get that going. Because again, anybody that wants to look at this community for economic development, the first thing they do, they look into these studies. Otherwise, they're coming into our community blind. The city paid for, several years ago, a thing called the Buxton Report. I would do that on probably every other year. The information that we garnered from that Buxton Report, again, was invaluable. We as a city have to know these things. We can't go into this blind. And I could talk all day long, but I'll pass it on. Thank you very much.
I'm good, thank you. Thank you, I appreciate it. I'll sanitize my hands afterwards, won't lick myself, I think I'll be okay. I'll be okay. A few things have been mentioned already that I would just underscore. It's an excellent question. What are some of our challenges going forward? Two of the major challenges, and I see our challenges and our opportunities as overlapping greatly. One of them is managing growth intelligently. Every one of us, I'm confident, is glad that you moved to Prescott. I'm glad that nobody shut the door before you got here. We are not in a position to be able to do that for people who want to move here in the future, but we do need to manage that growth intelligently. And as Connie mentioned, has been mentioned earlier, leveraging water, a commodity that's limited in supply, is one key way to do that. So that we can go on and on about that, but that's one of the pieces I see. Another, Connie mentioned as well, is economic development. We have terrific kids who graduate from Prescott High School every year. We send kids off to Stanford and to Princeton and to Yale and to military academies, and almost none of them come back to Prescott. That's a shame. We need those kids to come back, and we need, in addition to the thriving medical field that we've got and tourism industry that we've got, we need to be a technology-based economy here in Prescott. And the expansion of the airport is one of the things that brings us closer to that reality. Some of the committees that have been looking into that bring that closer to reality as well. At Prescott High School, 22 of our faculty members, including myself, are graduates of Prescott High School, so there are some jobs that people can come back to. But we want high-paying jobs that lead to a robust economy and broaden our tax base in a real way, and technology-based growth is one way we can do that.
I don't know that I have anything unique to add to what they've added. I think I share similar sentiments. I think growth is a major issue that we need to deal with, and doing that in a sustainable way, particularly with our water portfolio. I think we are careless in sometimes saying things like, we have the best water portfolio in the state. Well, a lot of that water portfolio is on paper. And the reality is how much water is in the ground, not what's on paper. And so we really have to take a look at keeping that Verde River flowing. I think we have a moral obligation to protect the environment. We are stewards, and we need to be wise stewards of this area. And so the growth that we permit within the city needs to be managed. And I was going to say infill, and Connie already touched on that. We keep growing out, but there's a lot of places within the city that we could fill in. I think that's something we need to take a look at.
Thank you. You know, water is the key in Arizona, where we're a quasi-desert environment up here. And at one time in life, back when I was on the council, we had a water issues committee that would sit down every year at the beginning of the year and look at what water we felt that we could distribute for the growth that we could absorb. There's a lot more to absorbing growth than just water. You've got police, fire, sewer, roads, etc. But water is the hinge-pin as to what that does. And if I get back on the council, I would like to revisit the water issues that we had when we would look every year, first of the year, as to what we thought was a fair amount of water for what we could tolerate in absorbing in a growth pattern. One of the things that concerns me in Prescott, and has always concerned me in Prescott, is the brain drain. Fact of the matter is, the kids that graduate high school or go to community college, they leave here, and we've spent all that money educating our kids to go somewhere else and deliver their talents. A lot of that has to do with the lack of housing that's affordable for an entry-level workforce. And this is something that's going to have to be addressed. It hasn't been addressed, and that's why you've got the quagmire of traffic that you have on the highway out there, because they went to Prescott Valley and Chino Valley and Yavapai County instead of staying in Prescott where they belong. So that's one of the things I would like to address when I get back on council.
Chris, can you talk about?
Yeah, I don't need a microphone. I don't know how many of you supported the additional taxation of 443. Nobody? Well, everybody did. Okay, that's taking $12 million a year of wealth out of Prescott, sending it to Phoenix to a dysfunctional pension system down there. Last year, on an expected rate of return of 7.3, the fund made 0.91. Everything in the middle was additional unfunded liability. When the tax was passed, council promised that they would stay on the state and work hard to get it changed. So far, nothing has been done. If one of you was put on council, would you do anything, and what would you do to change it up and make sure that we're not just throwing our money away?
I think we need to go back to what we promised the voter when we asked the voter to pass the tax. And that was that we would take every extra nickel that wasn't obligated through contractual type form. It's not dedicated funds. outside of public health and safety and basic services, we would take those dollars and pay that debt down. That debt needs to be paid down like we told the voters we would. That is a bad deal to keep paying interest on money that we could better use right here in the city of Prescott.
I think to build on that, this is a little personal, but I just met with my Edward Jones advisor last week, just to do an annual review, how are my investments doing? And he said last year your combined investments made 14.26%. I'm happy with that number. 0.91, that's disgusting. That's unacceptable. And we obviously need to fix it. I don't know how to fix it. I'm not a finance person, but if I'm appointed to the council, I'd be happy to take the lead on going to the state, working with our local officials to see if we can't get that investment, because there's no reason why we can't get a 7% return.
So I think you'll find that the four of us at least, and I think Mr. Carmen as well, are probably in agreement on a number of things. Sounds like we all initially supported 443, and the reason for that is we've got a debt that we need to pay. I bought a house. It's a different situation, I understand. I bought a house, I had a debt I needed to pay. I put everything I could toward that until I paid off my house last year, and Prescott needs to do the same thing. Once we do that, then we've got money available for other things. I agree with Mr. Lamerson's take on things, that date needs to be paid down as quickly as possible. To your direct question, Chris, what can we do? I think as a council we have a responsibility to continue to put pressure on the state, but as you know, that's outside of our direct purview. We can discuss together what we ought to do, and probably you're right, there's additional pressure that needs to be put on to PSPRS folks to look at managing things in a different way. The rate of return that you're quoting, as Mr. Moore suggests, as Eric suggests, is not acceptable. That said, it's outside of our direct purview, so what would I do? I'd do the same thing as you. I'd be a private citizen who would write letters and be upset about it, but I'd pay my debt in the meantime. And once we do that, then we've got more money available for either lower taxation of the citizens of Prescott or increasing amenities for those of us who live here.
Yeah, Connie, that's exactly right. So I too have I was very conflicted, I have to admit, with the 443. My first reaction was, I'm not going to support this. But you have to remember, I have a son in the system. I not only have a son in the system, I have two nephews in the system. I have two policemen in my family, as well as my son who's a firefighter. I actually went to Phoenix and consulted with a large law firm on what does it look like if a municipality were to have to file bankruptcy. So that is the reason, after consulting with this attorney, that I decided to support the 443. The reason I did is because we as a community had to get a grip on this, while in hopes that the legislature overturned this decision. Now what happened, as we all know, the money's been misused, and we had people that were on the PSPR's board that literally had no business being on it, had no background in finance, and didn't understand that. And oh, by the way, as former Mayor Harry Oberg gave in one of his presentations, 60% of that money was going to the wealth management fund, just the people that were managing it, and that's still the case today. So even though we have made some headway paying that down, you're right, the council and the mayor have been a little remiss in not going down there and applying pressure. Remember that old saying, the greasy wheel. And Mayor Oberg also did something wonderful. He actually got together a coalition of mayors to go down and apply some pressure at the time. That needs to be kept up, because unless we understand that this could happen tomorrow, if this upcoming recession, everybody's talking about this recession that's coming, if we get back in that boat, every bit of gain that we made through the PSPRS and the 443, we could potentially be back to 81 million and more. So just remember, the problem is not fixed. All we're doing is feeding the monster. So in supporting the 443, we put a Band-Aid on the problem. That's all we've done. And unless the municipalities, for example, Bisbee is that close from filing bankruptcy. They're upside down. The statewide, I don't know what the current is, Chris would know, are we $244 million in arrears in the PSPRS on a statewide?
The fund is 65% funded.
Okay, so right now it's looking good because of Trump. But let me tell you, you all know what's happening right now. The economy is going to tank at some point. Everything that goes up goes down, and that fund will do the same thing. So don't be surprised if we find ourselves back in that situation. So as a council, if I were on the council, I would be urging the mayor to stay a part of that coalition, go down there and start to apply some pressure. Now, I also know, because I follow the fire department, when I go down to visit my son at his station, I spend quite a bit of time with the young firemen that are coming on and advise them what it means to be in the Tier 3. The fire department has made a lame attempt to try to direct these firemen into another tier. But most of them, they don't educate them at all. They don't understand what diversification means. I tell these young kids, do not put all your eggs in that basket. It may not be there when you need it. Now, I have a son and 3 grandchildren in the system, and I'm hoping someday that my son will be able to use that system, but there's no guarantees. So unless the people at the top start to apply the pressure, again with the squeaky wheel, it's not going to change. So we're in a little bit of a bubble right now. So I hope that we don't take a passive role as a city. We really need to be very proactive in this issue. Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none. Oh, Ed.
Yeah, I'd like to address all of them.
Read this.
No, I don't speak
Speak
up. All of the taxes that we pay across the board, I'd like to hear from each and every one of you, what can be done to either keep them the same or even bring them down in some cases or in some areas. I know the schools are always looking to throw money at the teachers all the time, and that's going to be the fix, the cure-all, but it never is. It always goes towards pensions and all the rest of the stuff, and the kids don't benefit by it. But that's just one instance. So taxes across the board, what can we do?
I'd like to comment on that. I'm an area director for the Republican Party, and one of my co-area directors keeps track of his expenses. He spends more money in taxes than he does in anything else that he does in his life. More in taxes than he does on anything else in his life.
Sure.
Absolutely. I'm not sure what state you live in where they throw money at teachers, but it's not Arizona. I'll tell you that for sure. We do pay relatively high taxes in sales taxes. Our property taxes, as you know, are in the lower half of those in the United States. As with all things going up for sure. It is a concern for all of us that we get a good return on our investment, regardless of what that investment is. I see taxes as an investment personally. And so what can we do about that? I think we can make wise decisions about how we allocate our resources. I think we can broaden our tax base more so that we're not looking for more from the individuals who are currently here, but as we bring more businesses into the fold and other folks who are coming to Prescott, we can do that. Of the city's budget, about a quarter comes from sales taxes, is my understanding. About 50% comes from things like fees and there's a word for it, enterprise funds. About 42% comes from that. That's a great place. People who are asking for services are paying for those services. People who put in new streets are paying for those kinds of things. People who are building things pay fees for that. That's a good way to go about things, in my opinion, rather than going to the taxpayers over and over for things. I would not put myself in a situation where I would say we should never raise taxes again. That puts a limit on us in a number of different ways, but there are different ways to go about things rather than going back to taxpayers over and over for the same thing. I'll tell you as well, if you're interested in how money in the school district is spent, we are as transparent about that as we can possibly be. Brian Moore is our chief financial officer. His door is always open to visit with you about that. None of the money that you pay in taxes locally goes to pensions. That's a whole different situation on the state level, for example. So I encourage you to educate yourself about that and find out more and see how you feel about things. Thank you.
From a small business owner's perspective, I just want to mention how every time there's a request for a sales tax increase, that's very, very difficult for me. And I think Connie probably shares the same feeling. We sell high-end products in our store. For example, we sell optics. A pair of Swarovski binoculars starts anywhere between $2,000 to $3,000. Our tax rate is 9.1%. You buy a $3,000 pair of binoculars, you're paying $270 in sales tax. Or they come to my store, they play with it, look at it, put it back in the case, and they go home and they buy it online. The city gets no sales tax revenue. I get no revenue. I did all the work. I've got the bricks and the mortar. I'm paying the property tax. I'm paying my employees, but we're not getting any revenue because our sales tax is so high that we're pushing people to the internet. It's a problem. Okay? I can say that as a business owner. I do feel that we pay a very small property tax, and I feel like this city and some of the residents of the city have been negligent in recognizing the need to support public education. The funds, when they ask for an increase in property tax for education, it amounts to like a Starbucks a day, you know? And so many people are so frivolous with the way they spend their money on a daily basis, and yet they're not willing to fund education and make an investment in our community. So I think we really need to take a hard look at ourselves and say, how do I spend my discretionary income? And compare that to the taxes that we pay. So those are just some of my feelings.
Thank you. I agree with you. I agree with you too. But at the end of the day, part of the leadership role is to prioritize, not listen to all of the rhetoric that you get from special interest. And when you sit in the budgetary process, it takes 4, and hopefully more than that. It takes a quorum to accomplish anything. And prioritizing expenditures across the board for the council is where it starts. And that's what a council needs to do, is prioritize the expenditure and what's the first thing you should be doing to get rid of your debt.
Eric, you're right. So as a business owner, I remember my accountant coming to me at probably the highest year of income that my company had, which was in 2005. And she said to me, well, how do you like working till June before you get to keep 1 penny of the money you make? It's very difficult to watch this. Personally, I think every tax that we pay should have a sunset clause. Because if you notice, when they tell us and they sell us on a tax, even when that particular item is taken care of, they move that tax on and up into something else. It's got to stop. The other thing, I think all these taxes we pay have to be a moving target. They're not going to always be the same at every single year. Things change, and they need to be constantly reassessed. I'm a big proponent of pay for play in terms of the education. We spend a lot of money on after-school activities, and I think after-school activities are a must. But do we actually have to ask everybody to pay for those things? So that would take a lot of the taxes down. Another thing that we've got coming up here in the city of Prescott is the transportation. We've got people out there wanting to have the citizens, you and I, pay for a transportation system. Why can't we let an entrepreneur do that and make some money and pay some taxes? Oh, is my time up? Oh yeah, you're an Uber. Well, there you go. That's exactly right. Why would we take money out of your pocket? Anyway, so again, the taxes need to be, in my mind, a moving target. They need to be constantly reassessed. And we really have to prioritize where we put our money. So I'm with you. I just bought a blower. Here, let me just give you a quick example. I bought a leaf blower because mine blew up. And I went to Prescott Valley because the one I wanted, they were out of in the Prescott Home Depot here where I live. So I ended up getting the thing. Well, I got it all the way home and it was broken. The box had been open. So I thought, well, for convenience, I'm going to take it back to the Prescott Home Depot right here on 69. So they go up in there, return my $69.73, and she gives me a card. She says, well, here's a card for 93 cents. And I said, well, what's that 93 cents for? She said, well, you bought it in Prescott Valley, right? And I said, oh, that's right. They're at 10%. And this other Prescott Home Depot is on the Indian Reservation. So that 93 cents I now have in a card. So there's the difference. You have to look at these things, and you really do have to assess these taxes. Thank you.
This brings me to a couple of things I was going to comment on before I'll take your question. Judy Yee came to the Men's Forum, and she talked that Arizona now has one of the highest tax rates in the country when you combine all these different taxes. I am also the president of the Industrial Development Authority. And this authority was created many, many years ago and it's been very inactive. We talked about students staying in the community. We're going to crank up the Industrial Development Authority We started having monthly meetings. We used to meet once a year for no reason at all, it seemed to me. I checked the bylaws of that organization. We should be out pushing for new businesses. I've got 9 great people, or actually 8 now. One guy had to retire or resign. Well, I have 7 other board members that are going to be working on bringing businesses in and supporting Jim Robb, who has been hired by the city of Prescott to bring businesses into Prescott. We've got a wealth of talent on that group. They volunteered to participate on a board in the city of Prescott. We're independent. We can write bonds. We can bond over different organizations and so forth. I wanted to report, I was going to report this later, but Tim Carter, who's the Yavapai Superintendent of Schools, will be our speaker at the next meeting. Only 2 cities in Yavapai County can support the school districts with property taxes. That's Prescott and Sedona. All other schools go through the equalizer program and are funded partially by the state. So your tax dollars are working here to pay for Prescott school system. And Tim, in March, will be talking about those things. This lady.
I don't need the mic. I was
Okay.
a teacher for 37 years.
Oh, okay.
So you're going to get the teacher voice. I adore living in Prescott. And since the last year, 2 things happened that really, really upset me. So I'd like all of you to respond to it. The first one was they decided to put that jail here over the heads of the voters in several different ways. I found that really, really despicable. And furthermore, the consequences of dragging it through, now it's almost impossible to stop, but it should be stopped. And the other thing is constantly, I'm with Edward, the people who wave flags in the square, but for every single holiday that happens down in the square, the city canceled them. They allowed the BLM group to have their big Floyd march with hundreds of people in our square. They canceled the 4th of July parade through word of mouth. We had it anyway. They canceled the 9/11 memorial through word of mouth and doing it ourselves. We had it anyway. They canceled the Christmas caroling, and we had it anyway. And the square, when they light up the square, they canceled it. We had over 800 people just through word of mouth come with us organizing it, singing Christmas carols. They decided to film it, to have a virtual Christmas lighting of the courthouse on another night when there was nobody there. And they advertised that on the media as the lighting ceremony. Actually, there were hundreds of us. In our group, when we marched around there afterward, everyone in town, the whole place was packed. The whole square was covered with people and their pets and their little kids, and they cheered for us everywhere we went. The city should be doing things that are normal for this city and not canceling them and then shutting down the whole town for BLM. That hurt all the businesses in that square, all the tourism that we have, that people come to see these events and participate in them. So we were robbed of those events, but we had it anyway. But
All right, thank you. I'm gonna turn this over to Connie, because Connie, for starters, has been very active in opposing the jail.
I'm in 100% agreement with you, and we live right downtown, a couple blocks away from the square. We participated in every one of those things, because I grew up in the military. I grew up in countries. I lived in Athens, Greece during the coup. I lived in Turkey. I lived in England. I saw what socialism did firsthand. When I came back to the United States in the early 70s, I just kissed the ground I walked on, because as a child, we have no awareness of our freedoms that we give up. And if we start to buckle, it's a crack in the armor. And I agree with you. I want to talk about that real quick, but I am opposed to the jail. The jail is not, and this is just me talking, I love policemen. As I said, I've got them in my family. The first responders are wonderful. But if you look at the effects of this jail, again, once again, concentrating this amount of inmate population through diversion programs in a community of 45,000 people is insane in my mind. This is, that's exactly right. I've seen this. In fact, I did so much research, as I told Ed, a friend of mine and I've literally done over a year's worth of research. I have a file about an inch thick on communities that have taken in jails of this size and what's happened in the community. And you talk about the taxpayer, we will get the you-know-what end of the stick at the end of the day on this thing. The cost to keep this thing running, and then the pile-on, all the services. We've already got, Sonos came in, the behavioral health part of it. They've added on the mental health part. So are we gonna now have a resurgence of sober living homes and mental home, group homes because of the amount of releases through the diversion program? Now, I see both sides of it. Now, let me get back real quick to the square, and I'm sorry to monopolize, I do talk a lot. I'm very passionate about this because I am a one-issue person. It's called Prescott, Arizona, okay? And all these things affect us, and it affects me first because I live in ground zero and I see the effects of it. I am gonna be moving to a gated community very soon here once that jail gets open. But anyway, getting back to the square. So I'm gonna kind of talk on both sides of this issue in Greg Mangarelli and the council's defense. So another thing, again, my background in the law, I was married for 25 years to an attorney. So I really struggled, I hurt for Greg Mangarelli because I know he really felt badly about having to go along with the state rules and, stop all these things because nobody really knew what the liability was going to be to the city. So I wouldn't want him on that one side to inadvertently take on the liability that could be used against him and us and then get us into a lawsuit, because that's not what we want to do. And we are a very litigious world today. That's all that we needed to do was to give an organization like BLM a reason to come after us because Greg Mangarelli and the council and the city decided to ignore, the directive from the state. I hated it because it's a crack in the armor to take away our freedoms. We don't want that to happen. But now we're further along in this whole pandemic issue, and we're realizing with a 99.9 recovery rate, it was a little bit of an overreaction. But none of us knew. None of us knew. They didn't know, Greg Mangarelli didn't know, the people on the council didn't know. Our city attorney, Palladini, I'm sure he probably spent a few sleepless nights on the issue too, because I think our compunction, in our heavily Republican community here was, we want to guard our freedoms. And we don't want to do this. I don't want to wear a mask. I hate wearing the mask. Because to me, it's a symbolic thing. They're we're sheeple. They're telling us what to do and we're all falling in place for it. But I do see the other side. It's real. And a lot of people are not making it through the COVID. But again, we just have to sit back and look at where these people sit. We don't want the liability, the culpability of being guilty. We went down because I wasn't afraid of it. I don't have any underlying problems that I know of. But I have to have compassion for where they sat at the time. Now we're further into this. I wondered if maybe his decision would have been different if we'd had a year under our belt in a pandemic. So you have to look at it both ways, but you're right, I don't like it either. Thank you.
I don't have as much to say about these issues as Connie does, but I will say this about the jail. It's a complex issue. It's largely driven by the county, not the city, as you know, as to where the jail is built and whether or not it's built there. That doesn't mean the city does not have a lot of influence on that, of course. It's a very complex issue from a purely fiscal standpoint, and I think that's something that resonates with the folks in this crowd. It is enormously expensive to continue to transport inmates over to Camp Verde every time that they're arrested here. That's something that if you talk with anybody on our police department and our sheriff's department, you'll find is the case. Am I in favor of building the jail here? I wouldn't say that. I definitely see the downsides of it as well. But again, more a county issue than a city issue. As far as the celebrations that were canceled, etc., I applaud people who are civic-minded and get people together and whatnot, so thank you for that. I also applaud people who, when there's room for doubt, err on the side of caution toward themselves and others, and I appreciate that point of view as well.
I feel like Clark, I don't feel like maybe I have enough information on the PL issue. And I'm just gonna be honest, you know, I'm not gonna BS you with some answer that I'm gonna make up. I would like to see that it wouldn't be within the city limits. I think it should be closer to Prescott just because of the transportation issues, I agree with that. But it would be nice to have the old fairgrounds on 89A or something, you know, that would be a really good location for it out in the middle of the prairie, not right in town.
Amen.
So, as far as the COVID, I really appreciate what Connie said, and as a business owner, I have to tell you, it's been tough. I've had employees get COVID, I've had to close my store in Flagstaff, I've had an employee in Prescott COVID, and we had to send furlough all of our employees, and my wife and I were trying to run our business by ourselves. I mean, we're retail, and we had to get everybody tested. I mean, it's real, obviously, it's not fake. I mean, we know people are dying from it. I have had, one of my employees' father died of COVID just this last week. So, I mean, it's hitting close to home. I'm grateful that none of my family has contracted COVID. We've stayed well, we've stayed open. You know, when the governor's order came down last year that non-essential businesses had to close, I was panicked as a business owner. But fortunately, we were able to find 2 clauses that allowed us to stay open. If you sold optics, you were considered an essential business because law enforcement uses rifle scopes and binoculars and things like that. So we were able to stay open under that little, you know, glitch. And I'm grateful that we were able to stay open. I didn't know about all these little groups getting together, and I'd love to be on your list. So that when you do go down there and you sing on the courthouse, I'll be right there with you, because I think that's awesome that you have done this word of mouth thing and you've gotten the word out and you still continue to gather. It's wonderful.
I don't like COVID either. It's not good for anybody. You know, I got fortunate. I only had one of my employees come down with COVID. I also got fortunate in the fact that I'm mom and pop sole proprietor, and I could go and be in my store all by myself because none of my employees there for a while were allowed in. None of my customers were allowed in, but nobody came up with how am I going to pay all the bills that kept coming in. Nobody said they were going to stop. So, very similar to my friends here, we had to come up with ways to make a living and still keep the birds and everybody happy. So, I mean, that's just sort of the way it works. You know, with regards to the jail, I supported the remodel of the jail. When the sheriff, who's duly elected, overwhelmingly says, I gotta have a new jail because I can't meet the federal standards that I'm required to meet. And I'm not gonna stand there and call my sheriff a liar. I can vote at the next election if I don't think what the sheriff said is true. And I can vote at the next election if I think he led us down the primrose with regards to tax issues. But I'm not gonna publicly insult a duly elected official, especially at the elevation of the sheriff, who's a lead law enforcement officer in the county. I think that what he said was I need to take care of what the federal government has told me to do. And we fall under some of the same stuff as Scott Masher or David Rhodes fell under with regards to water runs downhill, so to speak. And sometimes you don't have a choice. I appreciate Connie feeling bad for Mayor Mingarelli. Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do, and it may not be popular, and it might not win friends and influence people positively, but sometimes you gotta make hard choices. So I did support the jail, and I'm not gonna apologize for that. And I can say I supported the jail, justifying that I also endorsed the people that serve law enforcement in the way of the sheriff. And if I thought that the sheriff was a bad person to begin with, I wouldn't have voted for them, and then I wouldn't have been put in that spot. But it is what it is.
Yes, everybody's gonna go, these folks have taken a lot of time, we're gonna let them leave.